Imina Trentai Shetinas Legislature and Guahan is back from recess. It's unfortunate, colleagues. Good morning. Manana Sizus, we are waiting for a quorum, and I'm hoping to get that real shortly. All the panel members are.
Madam Chair, may I ask which of our colleagues we're waiting for? Looks a little light on that side, just saying.
We are waiting for our colleagues.
Point of information.
As a point of information, the body can see that we are still waiting for more colleagues to come in. I do know that we have colleagues from both sides of the aisle, but we are still waiting to reach a quorum, and I know we've got a quorum now. We are in. We will begin at this time. Manana Sizus Talo, I will start with when we left off yesterday. Senator Barnett, you were done. I will yield now to Speaker Therese Chalayi. You have the floor for your questions.
Thank you very much. And thank you again to the panel for being here. I know you've got very urgent matters to attend to. I'm trying to help here through this bill. I think we're all united in our goal to open the schools as much as possible. If we have to double session them, okay, let's double session, but I hope we're all trying to avoid any online and any other incidences. But so that's the goal. So what we're trying to do, I just want to be sure, we're trying to allow public health to address variances. They've received and they've reported on as required by law. Thank you. The reports have been on time. They've been thorough. They tell us the action that public health has taken on all the requests for variances. Some variances have been granted, but right now, if a school fails and it cannot request a variance after that. So if it fails an inspection. So what we're trying to do is to expedite this so variances can be granted before inspection, during an inspection technically, after an inspection, even after failure of an inspection, so that they can then come back with a variance and perhaps be re-inspected and pass. That's the goal. That would allow more schools to get inspected and to be opened. And I know Department of Education is working very hard to get these schools ready. So they reported to us during our hearings, and I know they update this regularly, but generally, they have a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and 14 schools are in phase 1, and we're hoping close to ready to be inspected. And all the schools that are ready as of Monday are or have been inspected or are being inspected this week, right? And so as the schools become ready next week, hopefully more schools, that we're trying to take care of all of these in phase 1 for sure. Get those out. That's almost half of the schools. That's about 14. Half of the schools would be 20, and we need generally, I know this is not an exact science, but generally half of these schools to open in order to double session all of them, right? So for me, that's the minimum goal, is we want to open half the schools. We need to clear out phase 1, the 14 schools that are there, bring some of the phase 2 into phase 1 and ready for inspection as soon as possible. Right now, phase 2 is scheduled for 3 weeks or longer. That was actually when this list was created. Maybe a week or 2 has gone by now. So hopefully this will be updated, and we can move more of the phase 2 or even the phase 3s after hearing the GW news and that GCC stepping in to assist. That a lot, that we're getting movement in a good way from phase 2 and phase 3 into phase ready for inspection, ready to operate. So, we just want to make sure nobody's hands are tied in any way. But of course, there's a possibility that DOE will prepare more than 3 schools in a week, right? This is our optimism. And if they prepare more than 3 schools in a week, while we have only 3 inspector teams, that's why the rest of the bill addresses how to get additional inspectors if the Division of Environmental Health wants to use that method to increase their teams. Otherwise, it's up to them to use another method, how to increase their teams, how to make sure we can do more inspections at the same time. And I want to thank them for the work. They started off with one team, and then now they're at 3 teams, and hopefully with a little more adjustment, we'll be able to match the efforts of DOE and inspect every school that DOE has ready for inspection. And DOE, and so the other part of the bill is again to help DOE in the small purchase limits. My understanding was, for example, plumbing, that we were going to address plumbing on a island-wide basis with big contract for plumbing, but with this, hopefully we can take care of, for example, Jose Rios plumbing, or one school's plumbing, get that one school ready. It's critical for your double session needs, and that one's done. And you don't have to wait for the contract and the work on the entire contract for the island-wide. That's my goal, that's my hope. And so I just want to confirm with you if that's what you see this bill to do for you. Public health?
Good morning, Speaker. Yes, the Bill 156, in striking out the language, does actually give a little bit more leeway in the director's ability to grant variances or approve them. It definitely does. If you were to submit before, during, and potentially after an inspection, it does allow that leeway, in addition to GDOE making the corrections based on the findings or deficiencies noted in the inspection report. As to the governor's authority to detail inspectors, it was my understanding that she has the authority to do so already. I suppose it can't hurt to put this language in there. And then as to Section 4 with the temporary employment of retired or governed Guam inspectors, as was stated in the budget hearing, it is a moving target, much like GDOE, in terms of initially there was interest, but competing factors to our retired personnel in their lives actually has changed. So currently we only have one individual retiree that's interested, sort of a soft confirmation of maybe for this month, but even then, my concern with bringing on retired personnel would be how to expedite that process on the DOA level, just because they do that for us on our end. But we do have adequate funding to support this effort and fund these individuals.
Thank you. Public DOE?
Thank you for the update of the perspective. There's a couple of points that I need to make with regard to the rate that we can get schools ready. As I was listening to our testimony yesterday, I was thinking, how do we get the math to work out? And it's a math problem. And we all made it through Algebra 1, and we know what time the trains meet in Omaha. But when we figure out how to make all the kids and teachers meet in the school, that's another story. The logistics are significant. As I look at it, after 4 weeks, or the time that we have left before the scheduled opening of school, we can get to 41-42% of capacity. We can't delay any further. That would get us into more capacity, but it would create a chain of events that we just don't want to have to deal with, not only for our organization, but in the community as well. So what do we need? I need to figure out how to have the capacity to serve 30,000 people every day, starting on the 23rd. In the meantime, I'm deaf and I can hear it. Anyway, we need to have the access starting this week for our teachers to be on campus, because they're going to do 2 things. One of them is professional development, but the other one is attacking some of the issues that are holding us up with the inspections. They're going to be able to get hands-on, because they're all back. Some of them aren't even on island right now, but they'll be back to work at the end of the week. And one of the things that I'm charging principals with is to take charge on your campus, because each campus is different. They have different challenges, and the boots on the ground that live in that building know where the big challenges are. We certainly have been over all the details of what's expected from public health on inspection. We have no desire in trying to slow down that rate. We want to keep it going and accelerate it if possible within their capacity to do that work. But I need to get my folks back on campus and get them to work. We need to do that. So I need some sort of action from this body that allows us to do that. And then at that same time, we want to look at all of our facilities, and I'll do this personally, and determine how much of the facility is going to be usable. When you start thinking about the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, we already have worked out the mechanisms to cordon off parts of campuses, and then we can make an internal determination, because my goal is to have our kids back in school in their own building, except in those cases like Simon Sanchez where their building is being replaced. So we have to do that, and I have to have that direct contact with my leadership below this level, but the folks that are actually in the schools. So we need to be able to actually open campuses within the capacity that meets the standards for ratios, for the number of toilets, the number of water fountains. So that might be on one campus, we're split within ourselves. We might have 1 or 2 campuses that actually will have to double up on another campus, but we want to avoid that because the transportation logistics are horrific trying to make that work. And we want to make our school life as normal as possible, thinking about and remembering we're still shaking off COVID and a typhoon. So our community is under a tremendous level of stress that is unusual, but it's the reality we have today. But I do appreciate your comments on what you're looking at trying to accomplish, but I know that I need the latitude to make a decision about, is this building safe for kids? Because at the end of the day, I'm the guy that gets the bullet, not them, not the principals, me. So I'm not going to put any child or any one of my staff in a dangerous situation, not knowingly. And I've been around this business of facilities and construction my entire career. So I think I'm competent to make that decision, and will certainly work with the public health folks and their criteria so that we match up, so that when they do come to inspect, that we're going to pass.
How many schools are you waiting for mold mitigation? That you said you submitted a DLAN ticket up to Office of Civil Defense for mold mitigation. How many schools will be impacted by that?
All schools, we're putting mitigation steps in effect. Regardless, we have to.
Thank you. I just don't want to see the teachers there if that's not done yet, but thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Speaker Terlahi. We will now start from the back on the second round. This is your last round. We'll start with Senator San Nicolas. Do you have any questions or inquiry to the panel members?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir, if you were given the leeway or the authority to decide on your own that the buildings were safe enough, you could make that determination on your own. I just heard your last statement. I just want to hear it again.
I can make that, and several of my staff can, based on the criteria that public health is using. Those are the standards that we're trying to meet, and those are the ones we'll use.
So you can make the determination whether the school is safe or not.
I can't make the legal determination for granting permits, but I can certainly make that judgment as a professional, yes.
And if you were given the authority to make that decision so that we can open all schools, would you, would that make things a lot easier?
It would open the door so we can do what we need to do. So the answer is yes. There's nothing easy in this, but
Right.
It makes it possible. Right now, we're looking at a situation that when you do the math, it's impossible.
Right.
And we don't have that option.
I'm totally opposed to double sessions. I used to be a school counselor myself, so I understand the implications and all that stuff, that all the other things that go along with that. Although I would love to keep the students safe, I think the previous laws that were enacted kind of, I guess, hasten everything and put unreasonable timelines on everybody, and it's I think if you were given the latitude to allow all the schools to open, I think that would be that would be more better for the entire school system.
Well, I would assure you that to do that, we would certainly have to put limiting parameters building by building, because
Right.
I'm not, and I don't think you're suggesting either, a blanket approval to just go do what we feel like we should do. I certainly want to be adhering to the required standards, because I don't want to put anybody in a dangerous situation, nor myself in unnecessary liability exposure.
Yes, sir. I agree with that, but no, you know, it's coming down to the wire, and I want to be able to get as many students in, and also allow public health and all the other agencies to do things in a much more timely manner, more relaxed manner, and maybe we kind of like did it that way, we won't make so much mistakes. But
And our intent is to continue the repair and inspection schedule. You know, there's no stepping away from that.
Yes,
we want
sir.
to get
Yes.
everybody certified.
Yes, yes, and I do. I mean, it took a long time for us. It took a long time to get to where we're at, and there's so many issues involved. And I think the previous laws were placed on reasonable demands. And it's not that I'm saying we shouldn't do public health inspections and trying to get our house in order. It's just I would like a little bit more, I guess, leeway in that regard. But I think you're smart enough man to make that determination whether schools can open based on your good judgment and your experience with the schools. So that's all I have to say about that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator San Nicolas. Senator Joseph Augustine, do you have any questions for the panel members?
Sure, I got a few. You know, as I listen to both groups up there, the public health and DOE, very simple. For DOE first, what is your student population today is 25,000, correct? What is your school, the number of schools you have? You have 41 schools?
We have 39 campuses that we intend to have active.
No, how many campuses do you have today? Not what's active, what's being used. Well, how many campuses do you have? You're supposed to have 41, if I'm correct?
21, correct.
41.
41.
Okay, out of the 41, what number of students is that supposed to be able to fill up with? What is the student population that 41 school was supposed to be able to attain? 50,000? 40,000?
50 would accommodate? Our static capacity approaches 50,000.
Staff capacity is 50,000? Do you plan, because you're the superintendent now, do you plan a redistricting so you can kind of like reorganize what you got? Because how many schools would that reduce from 41 would it go down to?
Not knowing the capacity of each building, I can't give you an accurate, on-the-button number, but what I do know is that we are overcapitalized with capacity based on our enrollment. That's a process also that we would have to engage our community, because we know that in every community I've ever been in, there's a great deal of emotional attachment to different campuses for a number of reasons, and we have to work our way through that, and it involves the word that no one ever once spoken, and that's called rezoning. But we need to downsize the real estate, I agree. And in this process, with the situation that we're faced with, I want to look first at those campuses that are going to cost the most to renovate and see if we still need them or not, and then make those decisions. But that's a collaborative decision with the community. That's not just something I would do out of hand.
Understood. Now, the reason why, I'll give you a good example, Chief Brody. What is the student population there? Because that, in Tumuning alone, you have 2, 3 elementary schools? Wow. And you have no middle school there, but you got a high school. How does that make sense? I mean, I can see you have 2 elementaries, a middle school, and then a high school, but you don't have a middle school, and everybody goes to St. Rios. So, I'm just curious. And the population is not that much, and it's been dwindling. That's why I asked the question. If you've got 41 schools, and the student population is 25, and the number of schools you have can be filled with 50,000 kids, you're saying that your number of schools could actually go down from 41, could be at 30. Possibly, might.
Possibly. They could certainly be less than what we have.
Okay, and the only reason why I bring that up is because as I know that some villages may want to keep their schools. What we did there with FQ Sanchez, when FQ Sanchez was closed, it ended up by law, it was given to the Yumataka village. And it's up to them, they want to make it a charter school, whatever, but it was given to them. And the villages can take ownership of that campus. The only reason why I'm asking that, Dr. Swanson, is that as public health is looking at inspecting schools, you have 41 campuses. They're eyeing 41. I heard you mention, or somebody mentioned, can you give me the number of schools are in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 so we just can go down the list? Can you give me the numbers, please? Anybody up there, Frank, Erica, or Joe?
Yeah, the number for phase 1 is 14. Phase 2 is 13. Phase 3 is 12.
Okay, how many on the lease schools are in any of the phases? Any of the lease schools in phase 3, 13? I mean, or phase 2? Because I'd be surprised that they're lease school and we're still paying for the lease.
Okay.
Why do we have such an issue with them? They're being paid to maintain the schools.
In phase 3,
Who?
Adakau Elementary and the Stumbo Middle School are lease schools.
Right, no, I know there's total of 5 lease schools you got, or is it 6? You got JFK,
And JFK is,
Astumbo Middle, Liguan Terrace, and Adakau. 5. So where are they at?
JFK is in phase 1, they've passed.
Okay, yep, I was there at the reunion. Yep, they passed, they got a letter C.
And Tejan is under inspection this week.
Are they a lease school?
Yes.
Okay, those are 6 then. They're in phase 1 also? Okay, how about
Senator San Agustin, if I may, on that follow-up. So are you saying that private schools and charter schools subject to the same standards as it relates to the inspection? All schools inclusive?
I was going to ask that on public health.
Yes, all schools
Okay.
have to be inspected regardless of the
No.
landlord.
DOE is a different group of folks. I'll ask the question to public health when it comes to
Okay.
private schools. But to
Sorry.
you identified 2 schools in phase 1. How about the other 4 schools? Where are they at?
Yeah, and one. And that's in-
On the phase, the lease school. The reason why I'm asking this, Dr. Swanson, because I'm going to ask that the lease schools be exempted from this requirement. Because number one, we're still paying them. We put it in the budget to maintain the lease so that schools are maintained. And I'll ask public health that question. When did they change? When the schools were built, they were built to standard. They met the occupancy permit, all the licensing, and all they have to do is maintain it. When you change rules, the school didn't change. The lease is still the same. Now when the lease ends or there's any modification to the school, then of course they got to meet the current standard. But I have an amendment to this bill to make that work. But I'm just concerned about the number of schools you have because the lease schools are staying. They're not been up, they won't be up for redistricting. They may be up for redistricting to realign the number of students, but it's just amazing.
The burden to make the corrections on the lease schools with the leaseholder. And we're working with them to do that.
But Dr. Swanson, we need to understand, when that lease was first signed and they built the school, this was the standard. This is what public health said, public works said, everybody said. If you start changing the requirements and the school didn't change, how do you expect the leasee to put the burden of that? That'd be unfair. For me, it'd be unfair.
So, Senator, that's something that we have been in discussion with the lease schools, and you're absolutely right, and that's their sentiment as well, is they've got permits, they've been inspected prior to their opening and upon construction. Apparently, rules have changed, so the inspections that they're facing now have a little bit more teeth in it, so this is partial of some of their demerits, but there are some other demerits that they're dealing directly, as we understand, as a result of the typhoon. So some of these, that's the reason why for the phase conditions, and as our superintendent said, the responsibility to get these schools prepared and maintained is with the lessor. It's stipulated in their lease agreement, as you said, it's funded. So we're looking for them to make these solutions.
Okay.
But as you said, again, they passed upon occupancy. We were able to operate for the past several years, and then there's two things in front of them, is a change in regulations of how they're being inspected, but then also just the impact of the past typhoon, which is again is affecting some of the schools in a major manner facility. Thank you.
And on the same thing on public health, do all the other schools have the same requirements that you need to inspect DOE? Yes or no? Like private schools?
Yes, every school that is permitted does have to come into compliance, and they go into effect for all other schools, so that would be charter, private schools.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the charter. They
Yeah,
reported to us
yeah.
that they were already inspected, they're good to go, so.
Well, they won't have to, their sanitary permits were renewed. Come next year when they have to fall into compliance, it'll be different.
Okay.
But the prior inspection, as I understand it with 37-4, an inspection is required in order to renew a permit for GDOE schools.
Okay, do you have any info on private schools? And the only
Currently,
reason why I'm asking about private schools, because there's a billboard on top of by the airport that says, take care of our kids, get them to schools. And there seems to be a pitch to find ways to fund it, to send them to private schools. And I want to make sure, number one, at least they're certified teachers. Number two, they meet all the requirements of public health. What is needed on DOE should be no different when it goes to private. The charter school, we can figure that one out also.
yes, sir, that is actually true. There is no difference. That being said, the time frame at which they need to come into compliance versus when GDOE has to come into compliance is different. And that's, yes, GDOE has to come into full compliance by the beginning of the school year 23-24.
Because?
Per Public Law 37-4.
Okay, I just wanted you to say that so I
Yes.
can.
So every other school does not need to come into compliance until 2024. And so that is per when the regulations fell into, I guess, lapsed into law, got approved, whatever. They had 5 years to come into compliance, which was what was originally the original date that it's slated for.
Right, because if I'm correct, Francine, I heard you yesterday say that if we repealed 37-4, everybody would go good to go. They still need to get checked. You guys still need to get checked. Needs to still clear to be safe. But at least that would kind of ease off the pressure. And then DOE can speed up the process by spending their ARP money that they have. I'm not asking for so much money when they got $110 million to spend to fix schools. I just keep reiterating that, right?
It would definitely affect the timeline, yes. But that being said, we follow the law however you choose to change it, Senator.
Thank you. I think there are other questions I wanted to ask, but I'm going to leave it alone. I'm just concerned about the number of schools we have, that we have too many schools. Remember, I was on the Board of Education. I didn't like closing schools, and you're right, Dr. Swanson. The community it becomes a personal thing to them, and I don't blame them. But we can give it to the villages, or give it to whoever needs the school, the campus, or turn it into a solar farm. But with that, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator San Augustine. Senator Fisher, you're recognized to ask questions to the panel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, Vice Speaker. We are here this morning, and we're here yesterday on an emergency session. By the way, good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Fisher. I'm a senator here. We were called here yesterday on an emergency session because of the disrepair of the schools. It might be that some of the schools maybe are somewhat unsanitary, so forth and so on. But I think we missed the mark there. I don't believe that's the emergency. The emergency is the children are not, their butts are not in the chairs. That is the emergency. And we must get the schools open as quickly as possible. I want the first graders learning to read and their multiplication tables. I want the high schoolers doing the calculus. I want that to happen. I also want the children to get a hot, nutritious breakfast, because the school systems are a vital part of our society. It's a vital part of the social contract. You folks feed more people per day than just anyone else on island. So I want the kids fed. You do too, I know that. A nutritious breakfast. I want the kids getting a nutritious hot lunch. And in between that, I also want them learning the times table, the ABCs. I want them to learn to write. I want them to learn to socialize. I want them to learn to get in fights with their classmates. I want them to learn how to be citizens, and that's one of the roles that we push off on the Department of Education. After all, as a society, we only have basically 3 responsibilities. We got to keep people safe, we got to keep a reasonable level of public health, and we have to educate the children. And if we're not educating the children, that is a true emergency. It is not an emergency if one of the walls is dripping. That's unfortunate, and it's repairable. It is not an emergency with one school has a rat in it. That's unfortunate, but we can take care of the rat. In the meantime, those kids need to be in those chairs, and they need to be learning. I think we all join in that. I completely disagree. I suppose sometimes it's necessary, this idea of double sessions. Okay, those are a nightmare, logistically and otherwise. I don't want first graders and kindergartners being woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning and marched out to a dark bus stop where they wait for a bus that is probably 20 to 30 minutes late, and then returning to a house where mom and dad are at work, and, as one of my colleagues was observing, the aunties and uncles, they're not there anymore. These kids are coming in a double session, are coming home to a home without adult supervision. That's not good. That's not a good message to send to the kids, and that's not a good way to teach them. So we need to avoid double sessions at all costs. So to me, that is the real emergency. And it goes, just without saying, we're going to feel this for years. We went through COVID, as was observed, and those are lost years. We'll never recover them. And these years when children are not in the schools, learning their times tables, learning to behave themselves, learning to use the bathroom by themselves, all the stuff children need to learn, those will be lost years. And we have to avoid that. With that, I wanted to ask a question, because time's running short here. It seems to me that a big issue here is the idea of the variance, that we're going to strike the variance. So this is a hypothetical, I guess, to the superintendent. You might not know that. I know you're relatively new at the job, but when was it discovered that the variance issue would be a problem?
The difficult with the variances came with the introduction of the new law, 37-4. Did you communicate that the variance thing was going to be a problem to anyone here in the legislature? I wasn't here for that party.
Oh.
My team did address that with public health at the onset.
How about lawmakers?
No.
Okay. Then I'll throw it over to public
But
health.
it has been presented in testimony during the updates that we've given.
In public hearings. So, okay, so here in the legislature, we cannot fairly say that this is a big surprise. We have in one form or another knew this train was coming our way, correct?
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay. Yesterday, Senator Parkinson suggested that we just push everything off a year. Open the schools. Let's open them on time if possible. Let's open them all within 2 weeks. Clean them up at the same time. I trust you, sir, Mr. Superintendent. I trust you to keep our children safe. I know you will do it. And if a school is not safe, you won't allow kids in there. And I trust you to do that. Would it be possible, because last year, 3 months ago, they were in the schools. They were learning. The books were open. Here's how you read. See Jane run, and all that kind of stuff. That was happening just 3 months ago. Can't we do it again and chew gum at the same time? Clean the schools.
Yes, of course we can.
And sir, if you came to a part, I'm running out of time, came to a section where you thought it was dangerous, would you keep the kids out?
Will you keep the kids out if the school is dangerous?
I don't know, what was the question?
Will you keep the kids out if the school is dangerous? Of course you will.
Yes, of course we will.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I do have a hearing loss, so, and this is a horrible room acoustically.
Amen. You're not the only one. This room is horrible. I'm running out of time. I've got a real problem with the small purchases thing. I don't know why we went up to $250K. That's almost a deal breaker for me. And I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Tello, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker, Madam Chair. Tagging off of Senator Fisher, the $250,000, was that a request by DOE?
Go ahead. I didn't understand the question.
Yes, Senator, it was.
When the bill was created and you came for a public hearing, why wasn't it requested then?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Go.
Okay, so the question was, when the bill was, not this bill, but the prior bill, Public Law 4-37, before it became law and it had a public hearing, why didn't you request the 250 then?
Requested that?
It wasn't a
Go
part
ahead.
of the bill.
Let me see, just to clarify, so maybe in the earlier time prior to the storm, majority of our funds that we were going to utilize were federal. So I guess just in discussion, it didn't occur to us to increase the threshold for local. So even after the typhoon, majority of our funds that we're using are actually federal funds. But since we've gotten an appropriation, and I believe that money is still supposed to be available to us, we wanted to make sure that if we did in fact use local funds, that we had the same threshold as federal. Because right now, anything that's funded under ESF2 or ARP, the COVID funding, our threshold, because of our high-risk status, is $250,000, versus if we try to use local funds, it puts us, we can't. We just have to use the local level. So we wanted to raise it up to that higher.
So the federal
standard.
government allows you 250?
Yes.
Okay, so can you tell me what the local amount is?
I think it's 25,000.
25,000?
Yes, so for small
Okay.
purchases, it's under 25,000. Anything 25,000 goes out to competitive bidding.
Thank you. Okay. So the next question I have is timeline. Mr. Superintendent, you mentioned that you're working on all these schools and you're trying to get it done. The Tier 3, what is the final date? Do you think that you would be in compliance on Tier 3?
By when?
Realistically, please?
Okay, the tier 3 schools, on a restricted use environment, we could get into compliance very, very quickly, probably by the time we open. Now, to solve the major issues that would put them at tier 3, we're looking at significant contracting that'll have to be done that's beyond our capacity to do in-house, and that will vary building to building depending on the cost of the project.
Tier 3, can you actually make these repairs while children are going to school?
From what I've seen so far, if we can restrict the use of part of the campus and by being creative how we schedule, yes, we can do that safely.
Do you
we're
plan
still
on doing
looking-
that? Because if you move forward and this variance is lifted, then can you do that? And what is the date? Okay, you said, let's go back. You said something about how, it depends on the contractor, of course, putting in an RFP and getting all those out. Haven't you done that so far already?
Yes, we have several in the pipeline.
Okay, so you can give me more of a realistic time on when these bigger projects can be finished by?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, Senator.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been having discussions with our capital improvement folks. So there's a couple of moving parts, to use a cliche. We believe that some of these schools, at least 6 of the 12, I believe, have identified themselves as being able to open if we can shut down part of the school and go partial occupancy. That's an example of schools that have sewage and restroom issues. The sewage and restroom issues are being dealt with our capital improvement. That's what puts them as a tier 3 piece of work, because we actually have bids out for contractual work to fix all of our restrooms. So this would have been, pretend that there wasn't a typhoon, this would have happened anyway, because we have our COVID capital improvement projects anyway, right? So, moving forward, we would have had this situation anyway in our schools. So those earlier plans were to already section off parts of the school so that work could continue to be done. There's actually 2 options. One option is that because it's by region, if half the schools close, and then the other half get worked on by the contractor, and we double session with those schools. Or they stay within the same school and section off part of the work so that work can be happening on campus. It really depends on the discussions with the contractors, which we don't have a contract with yet. But the preliminary discussions that we had with the Contractors Association, that's what some of the advice was to us, that some contractors will ask for the whole campus to be closed versus some contractors can actually work within half the building. And a big factor in that decision is the manpower, is do they have enough workers to actually work on a regular basis? Because I guess the worst case scenario is we close down a school and then you drive by and no work is being done for weeks or months. So we're trying to avoid that situation and be able to use the campus while it's being worked on. So sorry, to answer your question, is some of these projects are going to be 6 to...
Go back to 6 out of 12.
6 out of 12 could be open. The other 6 were...
By when, Joe?
Oh, you're talking about like...
Yes, 6 out of 12 can be open by when?
Yeah, probably in a couple of weeks.
Okay, of the tier 3?
Of tier 3, yeah.
Okay, 6 out of 12. What about the other 6? When can they be open?
The other 3 have not given us, we're still working on an estimate.
No contract has been in place for those schools yet? Nothing has been out? Has RFPs been sent out?
Well, so the FB one, that has been bid out. The Simon Sanchez is not part of our hands, but the other 4 or 5 schools, we don't have an estimate for those schools yet. We're still working on those. That's why they're in the phase 3 section. But the 6, we do have a better idea because we know exactly what the issues are there.
Those particular other 6 that I'm concerned about right now.
Yeah.
Well, what do you, even if, let's say, all the variances were cleared, right, from public health, what needs to be done to those 6 schools? I mean, are they safe, Mr. Superintendent? You've said to yourself that you would never let children into schools that were not safe. So of those 6 schools that on tier 3 doesn't have the contractors or anything, are they safe to have those students go in with any kind of mitigation that you can do right now? Are they safe to go in and attend schools, or students go into 10 schools?
That will have to be a campus by campus evaluation, and we would severely cordon off any areas that wouldn't be allowed to be used so that we don't have anyone in that space
Right.
accept workers.
But have you done that? Have you done that evaluation of those 6?
A preliminary one, yes, but I haven't done that personally, not yet.
To give your, John Hancock on to say that, okay, I feel this is safe for our students to go in to continue. You haven't done that yet?
That's a process that we're beginning. In fact, tomorrow. I've got
Tomorrow.
5 schools to look at tomorrow.
The 5 schools of the 6 that we were just talking about, sir?
Well, I'm going to start with the ones that are on the
Tier 3?
Tier 3.
Yeah, the one that Joe mentioned earlier, you have 6 that that already has contractors in, that's ready, to get the work done on the repairs, but then you have that other 6 that have yet to even do an assessment or even to walk the school to see if it's whether you can go into it. Is that correct? I just want to verify. I know you answered it with it's going to happen tomorrow, but I just wanted to verify. Is that correct? You're just going to do this tomorrow, starting tomorrow?
Yes.
And can I clarify, Senator, just based
Sure,
on what
Joe.
you just said?
Yeah.
It's not that they have contractors right now. It's those 6 schools, we have identified specifically what the issues are that make them a Tier 3 school.
Wait, Joe, before
ahead.
you start, because
Yeah.
we've got 2 sets of 6 schools, okay?
Okay.
So you're talking about the first 6, which you think, the plumbing and everything that needs to be done.
Yes.
You've looked into that, and you got,
Yes.
Okay, which one are you talking? Are you talking about the 6 schools that haven't even been assessed?
Okay, I'm talking about the first 6 schools.
Okay, got it.
Right,
Okay,
so
go
the
ahead,
first 6
please.
schools,
Yeah.
it's not that they have a current contractor, it's that we've already specifically identified the reason why they're in phase 3. And in our discussions with the principals, because a lot of this is really also in collaboration with the principal and the self-inspections and what they're doing at their site, as well as the facilities and CIP folks. So the 6 schools that have self-identified and verified by our facilities folks have said that the reason why they're in phase 3 is because of sewage or because of restrooms that are not available. And then we asked them, absent that particular issue, how soon do you think you can open? And their response was, yeah, we can either be phase 2 or phase 1, even if that particular issue was taken care of.
Do you have a
So-
contractor for the plumbing? Because you can't send children to school without a restroom.
Right. Yeah, so we're looking at contracting for the plumbing. We're looking at identifying,
Joe, you
temp-
haven't sent an RFP out that? We've been discussing the school issues since the bill was passed in March, or it was lapsed into law in July.
right.
But
So there is a bid out for plumbing, and I believe that they are moving forward with some of these schools. So, and this is pre-typhoon. So some of these, some of these
understand.
issues are pre-typhoon that they were already starting. Anything that's additional after that is being worked on right now.
Okay, the plumbing, is there an RFP out?
So there's a bid out for plumbing, and some of them already have contractors identified.
Okay, so they've already answered to your request. Okay, so that can be done as soon as, you can put that in phase 2, like once they start the work, correct?
We're
Okay,
looking at
what was the
that.
estimated time frame that these contractors gave you to fix the problem?
Oh, that's what did we put in the bid? Is it 6 to 8, right? Right, 6 to 8 months? Okay, it's 6 to 8 months.
To fix the problem of the plumbing?
Yeah.
That means
Yeah.
this school will be out of commission for 6 months.
So just to clarify, again, with those 6 schools that have identified that plumbing is the issue, that's why we're looking at mitigation efforts like double session. So if it's not having enough available restrooms, they've already identified that if they were to either have half the population present,
Okay.
they would be able to function. Like I think it's Agata, BMS, they did, if they go half and half, they would be able to function as a school.
So technically, you're looking at maybe a 6-month time frame in the school year that will be double session, and then once that's completed, you go to full time.
Yes.
That's it. That's the.
Yeah, that's our potential effort.
Okay.
And Senator, just to add to that, because I know that that's an alarming time frame considering what we're up against in terms of getting the schools open, but understanding that these are the older schools that we're pinpointing. The facilities that are in disrepair that needs to be repaired isn't the common go to the restroom, get the toilets replaced. These are major capital improvement projects that deal with lines into the campus to properly address those schools. So obviously, these are the older schools that need the correction to the plumbing from I don't know the technical word, from the intake from the water line system to get it through to the restroom systems to get them working. So yes, that time frame probably could be a little bit more aggressive, but we're just proposing it based on the timelines that we had. And we do understand that we are behind the 8 ball because of the typhoon, but these were in motion. So we are trying to get that executed quickly.
I do understand about the typhoon. You know, I do put that in consideration on this. With public health, you know, listening to where we had our budget hearing, and then listening to you about the inspectors, it's not hopeful. But can you give me a realistic time to be able to inspect all these schools? What is a realistic time that you'll be able to do it? The ones that are left over, because I know you've already inspected some. I think it was 35 left over to inspect.
Actually, I corrected myself. I think we're 34.
Okay, 34. Okay, so with 34, how long will it take for you to do the inspection?
So the time frame of an inspection does vary based on the
Size of the school and stuff.
well, the assessment, the size
Right.
of the school, how many sort of complications or potential deficiencies we see, and it could take longer as we progress through the course of the inspection. So it does vary. Obviously, high schools take much longer than a elementary school, but ballpark, I know in our initial testimony, we had it at like almost a year, I think, to do all the schools, and that would be at one school a week. Now we've minimized that number at a time frame by like 3 schools a week. But even at that point, at 3 schools a week with 3 teams, we had a rough estimate of roughly December. And that, of course, is in line.
It's 11 weeks, 11.6 weeks.
About that.
Okay, so December, right?
Yes, and that is, of course, operating on the notion that GDOE is ready. The repairs have been made. They're confident that they would actually pass their inspection.
Okay, just listening to, thank you so much, Francine, for that, and thank you for your efforts as well. I know you're pushing this very much, and I'm glad they got you at the helm of this. You're doing a great job. Just listening to on both sides now, and it's nice to have both public health and DOE here, that it sounds to me like everything's going to be done by December, January of next year, or by December, which puts you way in advance of the timeline that's needed for the next school year. Actually, the original law that said that everyone needs to be in compliance by 2024 school year. Is that right, Francine? That everybody, even the private and public schools?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so in 6 months, that's just not very far away, but and I'm thinking that DOE at this point, Mr. Superintendent, to know that you're only going in there tomorrow for those 6 schools that are really in disarray, to only do your assessment tomorrow. I thought you would have done that, weeks prior, as soon as you came in. But I do understand the typhoon, an issue, and my time is up. But greatly appreciate the time you gave me, and gives us more information on how to move forward with this legislation. Thank you.
Senator, sorry if I can just respond to that. I apologize again if I wasn't clear, but the remaining 6 schools, not the ones that we think can open if they do double session, the remaining 6 schools, it's not that we don't have an assessment. We have an assessment of all schools. We've identified the main issues. We started to identify the different actions. What we don't have is we don't have a solid estimate of when we think those would be done, because those particular schools require additional contractual work. Most of the schools that we have under phase 3 and phase 2, the contractual work was already related to our original CIP plans. So we already had canopies and walkways as part of the plan. So almost every school reported more of the canopies blown away. Well, that didn't require a change in the scope of services, because whether or not you had 3 or 4 canopies blown doesn't change if you have 6 or 7, right? It changes the price, but then of course that would be up to the vendor whenever they put in their bid. So a large amount of the damage that's already related to CIP, we didn't have to add to that. The phase 3 schools, the additional 6, have work other than that. So we weren't prepared, and we're working on it now, to, number one, budget for that. So we're trying to look for funds, like additional plumbing work, additional electrical work might be necessary. And then that would require additional scope. So because all those factors are there, we don't have a current estimate of when it would be done. So we are concerned about that. We're talking about it, that we need to get that done. But so far, that's what we mean by not having a date. It's not that we don't have an assessment. We know what work needs to be done. We just don't have a solid date as to when that work should be finished.
Thank you. That's
you.
encouraging to know. But still, he says something's happening tomorrow. I hope that will give you the ability to determine whether it's safe or not, that you would allow these students to still go back into school while the repairs are being done.
Thank you, Sen.
That's the one I'd like to hear. Thank you.
Senator Lujan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to ask in regards to the variance here, and this was probably goes out to the to public health. And when I read this section about variance, it doesn't sound like a very easy situation to just sign off on something. When you read this, in the event that the school or the operator is unable to comply with certain requirements of the rules and regulations upon a showing of good cause, which is not a result of negligence or malfeasance, how is the director going to determine whether to allow this variance, and whatever the variance allowance may be was not a result of either neglect of malfeasance, where maybe something was originally, the citation was something that was cited because originally it was a cause of malfeasance, and then over the years neglected to be corrected. So how, I mean, is the director equipped to determine whether or not that the result of the variance or the granting of the variance is not a result of the situation being originally caused from neglect or malfeasance?
Sometimes that is actually difficult to identify, Senator. But for example, perhaps there was malfeasance, perhaps there was an issue of oversight, and let's say you have a slight pest problem that does grow through years of negligence into a serious vector problem. And obviously that may be hard to determine, and vector control is a huge issue for us. And so the way in which one of the other portions of the variance language is corrective action being in progress. And so again, the director is always looking at the safety of the children, which is basically the spirit behind these regulations in general. So as a result, seeing a variance request with a purchase order cut for pest control services, for regular vector control mitigation is the work in progress and the good faith effort that is also on behalf of GDOE or whoever would be submitting a variance request.
So basically I'm asking in the granting of a variance, it's not that I'm submitting today, can you sign off on this variance? You're probably going to have to go back and forth and say, well, let me see your corrective action. So that may not, I mean, it may take a little longer to grant that, because you want to make sure that when you sign off on that variance, that yes, corrective actions, and these are the steps. So it's not, it's probably not just a one-day thing, or I'm submitting, 9 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the variance will be granted to me, right?
That's correct, Senator. That is not something, we don't take any variance requests lightly, We always look at it with the rules and regulations in mind, as well as a plan to still sort of meet compliance in an alternative way. And so that's something that always takes time. And we have received in our monthly report that we provide to the legislature quite a few variance requests from GDOE. That being said, we count the ones that we receive initially that do need to be remedied or edited, or some more work is needed, that we have been collaborating with GDOE back and forth to say, we need a little bit more than this. And so because the director is the only individual that is authorized to sign variance requests, approve them for schools, that is the only, he would come back to us if it's still not stringent enough per his requirements as to how he interprets the regulations.
What is, again, roundabout, okay? What's the average time on a variance granting?
I believe it depends on the discretion of the director. If it's something as simple, which is the ceiling tile situation, which a variance was granted for that, because ceiling tiles on order or whatnot for all GDOE schools, which is quite a large order to fill, something like that can be mitigated. But I think his main thought behind, and I don't want to speak for him, but the main logic would be, what is the level of risk? If the risk is much higher, then the determination of the variance request submitted along with the mitigation plan or corrective action plan would take a little bit longer, because there would be questions.
Okay. So again, it's not a quick turnover situation. Okay, and that's what I wanted to.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, not a quick turnover. Likewise, even in the granting of the variance, in the granting of the variance, and this is, I guess, not with the director of public health, but with the superintendent. The variance is granted, whether or not it's granted or not. What would prevent? Again, I guess even if, as it is right now, there are some things that are not in compliance with Public Law 2845, the adequate education law, basically. Now, if the granting of the variance, and the superintendent requests that and the director grants it, what would keep the AG from indicting the director for not being, or the superintendent from not being in compliance with the adequate education law, Public Law 2845?
Not being an attorney, I can't really answer that question.
Yeah, no,
I would hope
yeah,
that the evidence of making visible progress and documenting the steps that we're taking would dissuade anyone from going down that road. Whatever political motives are out there, those are what they are.
Well, I mean, if the situation, if a school or schools are not in compliance as it is, and a variance is granted, it's probably safe to assume that you're little less, less than compliant with the Adequate Education Act, and that's what I'm saying, because it is law, and this Attorney General does enforce law as it is. That it's not for me to fix, it's for you guys to fix. So I'm just wondering what will keep the Attorney General from indicting any, and it won't. And he's not here to answer that. Anyway, I'll move on. Section 3, where it says the governor, and I think you answered this question, ma'am, in the previous the hearing, where the governor is authorized to detail inspectors from the public works, environmental, or Guam Environment, Environmental Agency, the fire department. And I tell you, as someone who's built homes the past few years, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I mean, these agencies are pressed right now. Builders, business folks, and all that are screaming at those directors because they can't get enough these inspectors out there fast enough. So to remove from these agencies to to public health, I don't think these directors are going to do it, just because they themselves are being screamed at in the regular operational days right now, because there are more applications than inspectors at this point. So I don't see that happening. Likewise, I asked as well in regards to the employment of retired GovGuam inspectors, and the director had mentioned that maybe one might be interested. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. At present, we have one firm interested individual.
Okay. So I see variance in Section 3 and Section 4, not necessarily, I guess in short, let me ask you in short, is this bill the answer to corrective measures?
As far as the Department of Public Health inspectors, the Bill 15637 does, the language struck out does potentially allow for turnaround time and variances to be submitted to allow GDOE, if they are approved, to be granted those variances, which may affect their inspection score. The bill can do that. I don't know if everything else fixes all of the other needs.
And likewise, you just answered earlier that the variances are not a quick turnaround, right? Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Senator, if I may also just add to Ms. Francine, you're correct. The variance in and of itself could help the process, but when the variance is granted, we still have to go through the process. GDOE still has to go through the process of making those corrections. So there's still time going to lapse. So it's not a real quick fix, as opposed to doing another type of action that would return everything back to the way it was previously, with provisions, and provisions such as reporting progress on, making these corrections that need to be submitted to the legislature or whomever it is that is appropriate that the reports get submitted to. Those might facilitate getting things done that have been neglected or not paid attention to for many, many years. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Senator Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The more I hear, I just I just anticipate in a couple of weeks that we're going to have some major problems with the opening schools, even with the passage of this language, because the timelines are just timelines. They're not going to change from what I'm hearing from public health with regards to. I'm sorry.
Sorry, can we just wait for the superintendent?
Oh,
Yeah,
no
sorry.
problem.
I want him to hear the questions. Thank you.
It's just as we're listening to the realistic timelines public health is providing us. Even if the schools are ready to be inspected and you get around to inspecting it, we still may be talking, many weeks beyond, towards the end of the month to actually open a school. And I don't hear, even if the potential of getting, just from Senator Lujan's question, any retired inspectors or anyone who's had some background that can come in and assist you, one additional inspector is not going to provide that much of an impact to help this process move any quicker. At the other end, Department of Education, because of their own challenges and even being able to get contractors and processing procurement, we're going to have possible schools that can still be used for students to be educated in, sitting idly because of this whole bureaucracy that now has come into play. And, I certainly understand, because I was very much a proponent of wanting to ensure these schools meet these standards for these children to be placed in. I mean, when we asked the charter schools in their budget, did they receive public health sanitization permits, they all said they did, unless public health knows otherwise. You know, if the charter schools were able to do it, you know, of course we would want to expect that DOE is able to do it. And I just see major problems in the next few weeks and after. If I was a parent, I'm not going to necessarily want my child to be double sessioned, because again, as mentioned earlier, I think a lot of these children are not going to have supervision, especially these younger children. I know you're trying to facilitate the elementary school kids, but even middle school kids. I wouldn't be comfortable if my child was a middle school child at home if I had to go to work and there's no one there to supervise them. So I think we understand that, and the more I hear, I just think we're all in for a world of hurt trying to start the new school year. Logistically, I don't believe you're going to be able to do all this busing. I was director of DPW. There are not enough buses and bus drivers, hopefully, that are, you know, on the job and not on anything else to safely drive our children. So I don't know logistically how that's going to be possible. Maybe some parents might be able to drop their children and pick them up, but that's not a majority, I believe, of the public school of 30,000+ children that are going to be able to get safely dropped off and picked up from school. So if I can ask DOE, what is your recommended solution that is viable? Because, I mean, understandable, the typhoon added an additional layer, but a lot of these issues, plumbing, bathrooms, those things existed before the typhoon, and they're going to take a longer lead time to address. What ideally can we do to maximize the opportunity of existing schools that are viable for students to go in? Maybe there's areas, there's a leak or whatever that needs to be fixed, but it's nothing structurally that's going to affect the safety of these children. And I'm assuming you're also working on your cleaning up of the facility. What can be done? Because we even heard teachers can't even go if they wanted to go to school to register, or administrative staff to register students for the school year. You can't even go into the school to do that. So what do you need to help facilitate to the maximum extent possible getting as many children in the classroom at this point under the circumstances?
Well, as I spoke of this earlier in the session today, we need to have the clearance to, first of all, let our teachers back on the campus so they can do two things, that they can do preparation for the instructional year, but also assist with the cleanup and preparation of the campus. They come back to work on the 3rd, and at this point, there's no place for them to go to do professional development because of the situation we're in. So we need that authorization to go ahead and move forward, and then use the parts of our campuses that are safe so that we can ultimately bring the students back in. And that has to be a building by building evaluation because each school community is different. The requirements are different. Some have suggested that we double shift students in schools, but we have to remember that elementary kids have to be at an elementary school. They're different size people. They have different size things that they need to work with, and even playground equipment is all different. So we have to then be able to go into, as I described earlier, being able to self-assess and determine which areas on a campus can be used and those that cannot be, and then cordon them off so that we can continue to do the work to bring our schools up to standards, get the inspections done, and get the permits in place. Whether that's done for a variance or some other mechanism, what I need to do is have all my people back to work on the 3rd and have all the kids back in the classroom on the 23rd. And that workforce that comes back later this week is key to us being able to achieve the levels of safety that we want for our kids.
So, Mr. Superintendent, if you're able to do that, if you were able to do that, how many more schools do you think you could put online versus where we are now?
I believe we can get all but those last 6. So that would give us 33, and that makes it really doable. We could be in better shape than that, depending on the efforts of the folks involved, because we also haven't been able to engage the parent community at the level that we want, and we want to be able to do that with the teachers, with the principals guiding their work in their own schools. The schools that have been able to do that have had great results, and we want to spread that across the whole system.
And so what would you need from public health to allow you to even get your teachers in the school on the 3rd that you said to be able to come in and begin this process? Because right now I'm hearing that teachers are not even able to go into these schools at all, even to go help. You know, if they wanted to go help and assist, from what they've been told, they're told they physically cannot even come into. I don't know if you have different information.
Technically, what they've been doing is going in to help with the work process to clean the schools up, but that's correct. To just generally be there, that's outside the line right now. And when I bring them back to work, one of the issues is there are very few venues on the island where we can do professional development that we can afford, because when you start renting hotel space, that gets expensive in a hurry. And that wasn't built in the budget when we started all of this. So we need to use our facilities.
Well, and now that you're on board, and certainly, I mean, you definitely jumped into the hot water coming here at this particular time. Are you confident you're going to be able to address these issues if you're given additional time to do it? Because I don't see any other alternative. I mean, we can put all this other language, but if you're not given additional time, we're really going to bring education to a standstill. And I think all of us, anyone who's a parent who has a child, school age, would want your children in school and educating. If you have a certified teacher and you can educate them, the details, the fine-tuning details, maybe we need to extend that time so that we can actually get back to education. Because I just see chaos in a few weeks. I see chaos within the homes of a lot of families in a few weeks. If we don't do something to acknowledge, and it's the reality. I mean, I don't like it. Probably you don't like it. I'm sure our people don't like it. Our parents don't like it. But we have to do something that's workable. I think otherwise we're just heading for a train crash is where I'm seeing up ahead.
Well, the thing that avoids the train wreck is very, very, very clearly operating under the cultural and social norms that we've set up for how school works in the bigger picture of the community. And so that means our kids in school at what is close to, if not the same as the usual times that families have learned and our businesses have learned to operate around. So that we know that this is critical. My goal is the sequence of things that we don't want start with online learning, then come down to double sessions. So what we want to do is there's another way to do rather than double sessions, but it still puts an impact on families for younger kids with supervision, because you could go on alternate days, sort of an arrangement. All of those things have been tried and they work to a degree, but they don't work as well as what we're wired for, which is kids at school from 8 o'clock in the morning or so till 3 in the afternoon on Monday through Friday. Now, we really have to, so I'm trying to get us to that, and it's going to take some flexibility on how the rules are applied to what we do. I certainly have no problem with reporting back directly to the public health or this body or both on the progress on a monthly basis. That's already language in the law. It sounds to me like me writing the superintendent's report for the last board meeting of the month, and then I give you a copy too.
Sure.
And that's something that we can do. At the same time, we have to energize all of the resources available to us, to include the adjusted procurement ceilings, which let us pay for these things as we go. This is going to be a tough first semester at least.
Well, I appreciate your response. Thank you. And Madam Speaker, if I could just make a motion with my 1 second left, if we can motion for a recess until 2 o'clock for a lunch break, for a quick lunch break for everyone.
It's a motion for recess for lunch. Is there any objection? There's an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion fails. Vice Speaker, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Just point of information, are they recessing on our kids right now?
Vice Speaker, you have the floor. We have the panel here. Let's proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I promise I'll try and be as brief as possible. Just hearing what's been going on since yesterday and today, I do have 6 questions, and I know some may have been answered, but I'm going to re-ask some of the questions so that I can get a better clarification. Are private schools and charter schools subject to the same standards as it relates to the inspections? Public health.
As it relates to the inspections and the regulations and the requirements they need to follow, yes. The effective date of their compliance is 2024.
Okay. Thank you very much. If the AG determines that all establishments other than schools cannot be given a sanitation permit without inspection, how will you determine whether or not business employing 300 people gets an inspection or a school? Also, how would you accommodate keeping hotels, businesses, and other government agencies open while accommodating the urgent needs for the schools? Does this bill help you make an impact? Honestly.
It does not. If the AG were to determine, because our current statute does not say a business cannot be operating without an inspection, if the AG were to determine that we cannot open these establishments based on they haven't been inspected, our standard operating thought process in terms of who we inspect first has to do with the communities that are at the higher risk level. So children, aging community, people with health disparities, those would all be our first priority. It is at that point, if we're able to meet that, then we would move down the line. We wouldn't know necessarily how to deal with over 2,500 establishments, which is what we permit. That's how we would prioritize it. After that, the priority is, we wouldn't have any specifications for that.
Thank you. If we pass this bill, how many schools will not be ready to open by August 23rd? DOE, anyone? Will not be ready to open by August 23rd.
So we don't have a solid number, but the best we can do is that the 6 schools that didn't give us an estimated date, it would probably be those 6 schools will not open until we get a better date from them.
How many schools will not be ready to open at all this year? That is, how many schools will not be able to come into compliance this year, even with this bill's passage?
Well, sorry, not to belabor this point, but our estimates are really based on the potential demerits we would get from public health. So if those variances that are being discussed were not approved, it's safe to assume that majority of our schools will not pass. But if all of those items that what we call the Big 8 were to be approved, in other words, those demerits would not count, we believe that majority of our schools would pass. And that's based on our current self-inspections.
Okay, I'm going to yield it to public health. Do you have any thoughts based on what was just said?
I don't speak for GDOE and their reasoning behind their approach, but that being said, again, the opportunity for them to apply for variances based on this bill would open up a lot more for the schools that have failed inspections, the schools that they know are the higher demerit items. That being said, I don't know if they'll necessarily be approved based on what's before us, presented before us, and then also at the discretion of the director, who's the only person that can approve the variances. So even though it does open the door, it doesn't guarantee an approval.
So my next question was going to say, does this bill solve the problem? Would it allow for all schools to open on time, or at least at a reasonable time? And I know you said it helps, but would this be a good resolve, or repealing the public law would be better? I'm open to both.
I'm not sure about GDOE's timeline in terms of their procurement and their corrective actions being made. I do think that there are some merits to 37.4 in that the reporting requirement that is required on our end for public health, because we're more than happy to provide status updates. I think it helps, but it may not necessarily resolve the short-term time frame that that everybody's trying to get for the schools to be compliant with the amount of days they need for instruction, coupled with the need to open and the demand to open.
Okay. Again, Madam Speaker, then maybe I'll just leave it to my last question. What do you think the solution is to allow all schools to open on time, or at least a reasonable amount of time for both? What do you think the solution is? Is it a complete repeal? Is it this variance? What do you think the solution is to allow all schools to open on time, or at least a reasonable amount of time?
That goes back to my original statement that we would really need to have the latitude provided to us to, first of all, get all of our staff back on campus, do the corrective work that we can, and then go into classifying each building in terms of readiness, continue with the inspections, continue with corrective action, but go ahead and bring the kids back to the schools with some kind of authorization, whether it's under a variance or some other term, so that we can open on time. And then continue to report to this body and to public health on our progress with mitigation and correction, and continue inspections.
Okay, thank you for that. You know, maybe, just one more. I got a couple of minutes. So it was said earlier, and I just want to make sure I'm saying this right. So if we pass this bill today, only 6 schools will be closed? Am I saying that correct, or I just want to make sure I'm getting that.
No. I guess just to clarify, what we're saying is based on our estimates, we believe that right now it's only 6 schools that are up in the air with no estimate right now. In fact, we've been discussing that. So based on the additional work that's needed, we don't have a solid date. But if
Meaning they didn't turn in anything?
No. It just requires additional kind of costing out and probably additional contractual work that needs to be done. So based on that information, we don't have an estimate of when all of that will be completed. Okay. With the passage of this particular law, it really does help with the variance piece, because as we noted earlier, even if we were to get inspected, we can't guarantee that all schools would pass inspection. But based on our self-inspections, we've already, we already have a list and identified all the major items where we're losing points on, and that's where we get the consistent 8. So we call it the Big 8. So if we were to get, and I'm using the wrong terminology, I know, with public health, where it's like a blanket variance for all 8, meaning all schools would not be dinged for those 8 items. We believe that majority of them would open, with the exception of the 6, which we're not 100% sure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I really appreciate the time. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Senator Canata.
Madam Speaker, I make a motion to recess.
There's a motion to recess.
Until 2:30.
Until 2:30? Is there any objection? Hearing no objection, we're recessed until 2:30.